In a world that constantly demands your attention, being alone can feel like a weakness. But let me tell you something. Solitude is not weakness, it is strength. The moments when no one is watching are the very moments that define who you truly are. When you embrace solitude, you begin to understand yourself on a deeper level. You strip away the voices of the crowd, the opinions of others, and the noise of the world. In that silence, you discover clarity, the kind of clarity that guides your decisions, your dreams, and your destiny. Solitude is where strength is built. Anyone can stand strong in front of others, but real strength is developed when you stand alone, when you sit in the quiet and face your fears, your doubts, and your insecurities. That's when you become unshackable. It is also in solitude that creativity is born. Every vision, every invention, every great movement started with someone who dared to sit alone and think differently. The silence becomes a canvas, and your mind becomes the brush. And most importantly, solitude teaches you independence. It frees you from the need for approval, from the chains of validation, from waiting on someone else to push you forward. When you learn to move alone, you learn you don't need anyone's permission to chase your purpose. When you're alone, the first thing you realize is how loud the world has been around you. All the voices, opinions, gossip, distractions, they've been filling your mind so much that your own voice gets lost in the echo. But the moment you step into solitude, when it's just you in silence, that's when your own voice finally comes alive. And let me tell you, that voice is the most powerful one you'll ever hear. Clarity don't come when everybody is telling you what to do, who to be, where to go. Clarity comes when you block out the noise and sit with yourself. A lot of people run from that silence because it's uncomfortable. They don't want to hear their own thoughts. They don't want to face the truth of where they are and what they need to fix. But clarity never lives in comfort. Clarity lives in courage. There's a quote that says, all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. Think about that for a second. Most people would rather stay busy than face themselves. But if you don't face yourself, how will you ever grow? Solitude forces you to deal with your reality. It shows you what's broken, what's missing, and what's possible. And once you see it clearly, nobody can blind you again. I remember hearing a story about a young man who wanted to be a great leader. He went to a wise elder and asked, "What must I do to lead people?" The elder smiled and said, "First, you must lead yourself." The young man didn't understand. So the elder told him to spend 7 days alone in the mountains. No food, no company, no distraction, just himself. The young man thought it was a waste of time, but he went. When he came back, he said, "Now I see. I met my fears. I met my doubts. I met the parts of me I'd been running from. And once I faced them, they couldn't control me anymore." That's the power of clarity that only solitude gives. See, clarity is not just about vision. It's about alignment. When you're alone, you align your actions with your values. You start asking yourself questions like, what do I really want? Am I chasing what's mine or what the world told me to chase? Without solitude, you end up living a life that ain't even yours. You end up running someone else's race. But with solitude, you see your path clearly. You see what's worth your energy and what's just noise. And let me tell you something. People who live with clarity don't move the same as people who don't. They walk different. They talk different. They don't get distracted easy. You can feel it when they enter a room, that energy of someone who knows exactly who they are and where they're going. And that comes from taking time alone, sharpening the mind like a blade in silence. Now, once you get clarity from solitude, the next step is strength. And solitude builds strength in ways nothing else can. Strength ain't just about muscles or money. Real strength is about discipline, patience, and resilience. And those things are forged in the quiet moments when nobody's watching. Think about the seed under the soil. Before it breaks the ground and grows into a tree, it spends time in darkness. Alone, hidden. Nobody praises it. Nobody sees it. But in that solitude, it builds the strength to push through the dirt to reach the light. That's how we are. The strength you need for life doesn't get built when the world is cheering you on. It gets built when you're alone, grinding, training, working, and nobody is clapping. There's another story I heard about a boxer. Everybody saw him win championships, but what they didn't see was the hours he spent alone in the gym. No cameras, no crowd, no spotlight. Just him, the bag, and the silence. When they asked him how he became so strong, he said, "The fight is won long before the ring. It's won in the lonely hours nobody talks about." That's solitude. That's where strength is born. Being alone teaches you discipline because there's nobody else to hold you accountable. You got to hold yourself. You wake up early, you push yourself through the work. You resist distractions, not because someone is watching, but because you promised yourself. That's self-respect, and that's what builds unshakable strength. And solitude also gives you patience. In today's world, everybody wants quick success. They want it overnight. But real strength is slow cooked. It takes time. And when you're alone, you learn to sit with that process. You learn that just because it's not happening fast doesn't mean it's not happening at all. You learn to trust the grind, trust the silence, trust the journey. Resilience is another gift of solitude. when you've been alone, when you've fought your battles in silence, when you've carried yourself through dark times with no one to call, you become unbreakable because you know you can handle it. You've proven it to yourself, and nobody can take that away from you. One of the greatest tests of strength is being able to walk away from what doesn't serve you, even if it means walking alone. Most people stay stuck in toxic places, toxic relationships, toxic habits because they're afraid of being alone. But solitude teaches you that you're enough, that you don't need to beg for company to feel strong. You learn to stand tall by yourself. And when you stand tall alone, you're twice as strong when you stand with others. Let me drop this on you. Solitude is like a mirror. It shows you the truth. Sometimes you see beauty, sometimes you see flaws. But either way, you see reality. And when you see reality, you get clarity. And when you face reality, you build strength. That's the cycle. So don't run from solitude. Don't fear the silence. Don't think being alone makes you weak. It makes you powerful. Use that time to hear your voice, to sharpen your vision, to discipline your habits, to build resilience. Because when the storm comes, and it always does, it won't be your friends, your followers, or the crowd that carries you through. It will be the strength you built in solitude. When you step into solitude, something powerful happens inside you that most people never take the time to experience. The noise of the world finally fades and your mind gets the space it needs to breathe. And in that breathing space, creativity wakes up. People think creativity is just about painting, music, or writing, but that's just one part of it. Creativity is about problem solving. It's about vision. It's about seeing what isn't there yet and daring to bring it to life. And the truth is, the greatest ideas, the most game-changing visions, they almost always come from solitude. When you're surrounded by people all the time, you can't hear your own imagination. You're too busy reacting, too busy listening to what everyone else thinks, too busy trying to keep up with the pace of the crowd. But when you cut away from all of that and sit with yourself, that's when your mind begins to play. That's when ideas come flowing, not forced but natural. There's a story about a man who lived in a crowded city, working day and night, chasing money, chasing approval. But deep down, he felt empty, like something was missing. One day, he decided to leave everything behind for a while and went to stay in a small cabin away from everyone. At first, the silence drove him crazy. He wasn't used to it. But after a week, something shifted. Ideas started coming to him, visions he never had before. He realized he'd been living someone else's dream, not his own. That solitude gave him the creativity to see a new path, and when he came back, he built a life he truly wanted. That's what silence does. It gives your mind the canvas to paint your future. Creativity is like a river that's always flowing, but when your mind is cluttered with noise, it's like putting rocks and trash in the water. The flow gets blocked. Solitude clears the river. It removes the blockages so your ideas can move freely again. Some of the most legendary works ever created were born when people locked themselves away from the world, not because they hated people, but because they understood that to bring something unique into the world, you have to separate from it first. And let's be real, creativity also takes courage. Because when you're alone, the ideas that show up don't always match what the world expects. Sometimes they're different. Sometimes they're uncomfortable. Sometimes they're so big that even you start doubting them. But that's where solitude gives you strength too. It gives you the courage to listen to those ideas, to nurture them, to grow them into something real. And when you bring them out to the world, people may laugh at first. They may doubt you. They may even resist you. But eventually, they'll respect the vision that was born in your solitude. There's a quote that says, "Without solitude, no serious work is possible." That means no true art, no true invention, no true innovation can exist without moments of being alone. Think about it. Before any song is sung, before any book is written, before any empire is built, it starts in someone's mind in silence. Solitude is the womb of creativity. Now let's talk about independence, because that's another gift solitude gives you. When you're alone, you learn something that most people never figure out. You learn that you don't need external validation to move forward. You learn to be your own foundation. Independence is not about being cold or shutting people out. It's about having the strength to move even when nobody's cheering. A lot of people live their whole lives as prisoners to opinions. They can't move unless somebody tells them they're good enough. They can't take risks unless the crowd approves. They can't even love themselves unless somebody else loves them first. But solitude breaks those chains, because when you're alone, you realize you're enough. You realize your worth doesn't come from likes, followers, or applause. It comes from who you are when the world is silent. I once heard a story about a woman who was always in relationships. Every time one ended, she ran to another because she was scared to be alone. One day, after her heart was broken again, she decided to stay single for a year. At first, she felt lost, but slowly, she learned to enjoy her own company. She picked up hobbies, started traveling, started building her career. She realized she had been leaning on others for her happiness when she had the power all along. That solitude taught her independence, and when she finally chose to be with someone again, it wasn't from fear of loneliness, it was from strength and choice. Independence doesn't mean isolation. It means you have the freedom to walk your own path. It means you don't bend every time the wind blows. It means you don't need permission to be yourself. And once you learn that in solitude, you move differently in the world. You no longer beg for acceptance. You create it within yourself. Here's the truth: the world respects people who can stand on their own, not because they're perfect, but because they're solid, because they don't crumble when they're left alone. When you can look at yourself in the mirror and know you got you, no matter what, that's independence. That's freedom. And let's not forget, solitude also teaches you how to make decisions without being swayed. When you're constantly surrounded by people, your choices often get influenced. Friends tell you what they think, family tells you what they expect, society tells you what's normal. But when you spend time alone, you learn to make decisions from your own truth. You learn to trust your instincts, your intuition, your gut. And that independence in decision making is priceless because it means your life belongs to you, not to the crowd. There's another story I love. A young man once asked a mentor, "How do I become strong enough to lead?" The mentor said, "Spend time alone until you don't fear it anymore." Because when you don't fear being alone, you don't fear losing people. And when you don't fear losing people, you don't fear telling the truth. And when you tell the truth, you lead with strength. That's the chain reaction solitude creates. It teaches you independence so you can lead yourself and others with authenticity. Solitude sparks creativity and fuels independence because both come from the same place: trust in yourself. The more you trust yourself, the more your mind unlocks ideas and the less you need outside approval to pursue them. And that combination is unstoppable. Think of the greatest innovators, the dreamers, the builders. They all had moments where they had to step back from the crowd, go quiet, and listen to the whispers of their own imagination. They all had to find the courage to believe in their vision before anyone else did. That's solitude. That's independence. The truth is, we live in a world that constantly tells you to avoid being alone like it's some kind of curse. They call it loneliness like it's something to fear. But the ones who understand the strength of solitude know it's not a curse, it's a blessing. It's the place where ideas are born, where strength is built, where independence is forged. It's where you meet the real you. And once you meet the real you, you can't go back to living blind. You can't go back to chasing empty validation. You can't go back to drowning in noise because you've tasted the power of silence. You've felt the fire of creativity. You've stood on the solid ground of independence. And that changes everything. So take solitude seriously. Don't run from it. Don't fill every quiet moment with distractions. Sit with it. Let it speak to you. Let it sharpen your creativity. Let it strengthen your independence. Because the truth is, solitude is not the absence of something. It's the presence of everything you need to grow. People hear the word alone and instantly connect it to weakness. They think if you're by yourself, you're lacking something, you're missing out, you're not enough. But that's a lie the world sells because most people are terrified of themselves. Alone doesn't mean weak. Alone means you're strong enough to hold yourself up when nobody else does. Alone means you trust your own back when the world turns theirs. Alone means you've got the courage to walk a road others don't have the guts to step on. The truth is, weakness isn't in being alone. Weakness is in being unable to stand without a crowd. If your identity only exists when you're surrounded by people, what happens when they leave? If your confidence only exists when you're validated, what happens when validation stops? Strength is when you walk into a room with no inner edge, no applause, and still know exactly who you are. There's a story about a warrior who was captured and thrown into a cell. No soldiers, no weapons, no armor, just him in darkness. For months, he was alone and his enemies thought that would break him. But when they opened that cell, they didn't find a broken man. They found someone sharper, stronger, calmer. He had trained his mind in solitude, and when he walked out, he was untouchable. His strength came from learning that he didn't need the world to define him. That's the power of being alone without being weak. Weakness hides in dependency. It's in needing someone else to carry your spirit every day. It's in constantly reaching outside of yourself for courage you should be building within. But solitude strips that away. It forces you to see that everything you've been searching for is already inside. And when you discover that, you're no longer afraid of being alone, because you know it's not an empty place. It's a proving ground. Alone doesn't mean weak. It means you're in training. It means you're building muscle most people don't even realize they need. Mental muscle, emotional muscle, spiritual muscle. You're learning discipline, patience, focus, all the qualities that can't be taught in a crowd. That's why some of the strongest people you'll ever meet are the ones who've walked through seasons of solitude. They know how to survive on silence. They know how to create energy from within, and that makes them unstoppable. And now we reach the deeper truth, the ability to turn loneliness into power. This is where most people get stuck. They confuse solitude with loneliness, but they're not the same. Solitude is chosen, loneliness feels forced. Solitude is when you take time for yourself. Loneliness is when you feel like nobody cares. But here's the thing, loneliness can destroy you if you let it, or it can build you if you flip it. There's a quote that says, "The wound is where the light enters." Loneliness is that wound. It's painful. It makes you question yourself. It makes you feel invisible. But if you let it, it can also be the place where you rebuild your strength, where you find your vision, where you rise in ways you never thought possible. Think about the eagle. When it's time to grow, it leaves the flock and flies alone to the highest point it can find. It sheds old feathers. It sharpens its beak. It renews itself in silence. That process is lonely, but when it's done, the eagle comes back stronger, sharper, unstoppable. Loneliness can be that process for you. It can either break you or it can refine you. The choice is yours. I once heard about a man who lost everything. His job, his friends, even his family turned on him. He spent nights walking the streets alone, thinking he had nothing left. But one night, sitting on a park bench in that loneliness, he realized something. For the first time, he had no one else's expectations to carry, no one else's dreams to live, no one else's rules to follow. He was free. That loneliness gave him the space to rebuild, not the life others wanted for him, but the life he truly wanted. Years later, he was successful, respected, and stronger than ever, all because he turned loneliness into power. Loneliness teaches you self-reliance. It forces you to find comfort in your own presence. It teaches you to stop begging for company and start building with yourself. And when you do that, something changes. You stop fearing the silence and you start using it. You turn that empty space into a laboratory for growth. You start reading, learning, creating, dreaming, planning. The hours you used to waste feeling sorry for yourself become the hours that shape your future. Here's the real test of life. Can you sit in your loneliness without running from it? Can you take the pain and turn it into purpose? Because if you can, you've unlocked a level of power most people will never know. Most people run from loneliness into distractions, into relationships that don't serve them, into addictions that numb them. But the ones who face it, the ones who embrace it, they transform. Let me give you another story. A young artist once said that the greatest songs he ever wrote came from nights when he was alone, broken, and lonely. He could have drowned in that pain, but instead he turned it into art. And that art went on to heal millions of people who felt the same loneliness. That's what happens when you flip loneliness. It doesn't just build you, it blesses others. And that's the secret most people don't realize. Loneliness isn't the end, it's the beginning. It's the spark that can light up your creativity, your strength, your independence. It's the place where you discover who you are without the noise of the world. It's the soil where resilience grows. It's the silence that sharpens your voice. So don't ever believe that being alone makes you weak. Weakness is needing the world to hold you together. True strength is when you can walk through loneliness, not just survive it, but turn it into something that fuels you. When you learn to do that, you stop fearing the empty spaces in life because you know those spaces are where transformation happens. The next time you feel lonely, don't run. Sit with it. Breathe into it. Ask yourself, what can I build here? What can I learn here? What can I create here? Turn it into fuel, turn it into focus, turn it into fire. Because loneliness, when harnessed, is not your enemy. It's your greatest teacher. So the next time you find yourself alone, don't see it as loneliness. See it as power. Because solitude is not empty. It is full of growth, full of vision, and full of strength. And when you master the art of standing alone, nothing in this world can break you.